All right, guys. Hey, welcome to this edition or this episode of Clay's Cortex, the podcast. And we're super excited. Actually, I'm really super excited to have Scott here, part of VitL Nutrition. We're going to be talking about this topic. I reached out to him, and I've been seeing this a little bit with athletes. And I was like, hey, would you mind to do an episode about this? And he said, yeah, totally. And so I'm really excited to have him talk about his experience and seeing when it comes to athletes and under eating and so forth. And we may go a bunch of different directions, so it just kind of varies, but we're really excited to do this. So before I talk any longer, I'll be quiet. This is Scott. Like, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and so forth.
Yeah, for sure. So my background's in biochemistry and cell biology. My master's in nutrition and dietetics. I have a practice here locally. Work with, a lot of athletes, do some weight management outside of that, so a little bit of general population stuff too. Yeah. But really, guys, here, work with guys down in California over to Florida. I think, all levels of competition, right? Really starting out kind of like in high school, collegiate, pros, Team USA, stuff like that. Really, our goal is kind of transforming that science of nutrition into a lot of these kind of foods and meals and individualized strategies to help them achieve their goals, whatever those may be.
Yeah. So what got you interested in wanting to do this?
It's been a long road, man. I kind of went through undergrad. I went into undergrad as econ and math. I loved it, but I was like, dude, what am I gonna be doing for the rest of my life? I have no idea. I don't know. All my friends were doing other stuff, and so I kind of went that kind of biochemistry route and started getting into it and worked in a lab, and I didn't really love that. I was like, it's kind of boring being down here with some cells all alone all the time, just hanging out. So went on to do my master's in nutrition dietetics, and then actually thought I wanted to go to med school.
Okay.
Went for a year and was
I
like,
think I heard.
Yeah. Went for a year and was like, man, everything that I kind of love about this still is related back to nutrition. And that's when we were starting my practice. So I was in med school and starting VitL at the same time. And I was like, so I was being drawn that way and pulled that way. And I don't know, it's been 6, 7, 8 years now. Cool. I don't know.
Yeah, it's been a while. Which is super cool, man. I read this book called Linchpin. I don't know if you heard of it. Okay. This is kind of rabbit trail, guys. But Linchpin, so it talked about how not to be a cog in the wheel, right? Essentially when it comes to us being creative and so forth. And I think what's really cool about, if I'm saying from my perspective, how they built their business, VitL Nutrition in Woodinville, it's not a cog in the wheel. It's not a plug and play. I like to say plug and play, but it's essentially something to where it's like, hey, you want something that's dialed towards you, here you go, let's go from there in the education process. And I think it interrupts the normal mass marketing of, this is nutrition, which in my opinion, what I've seen is, here's the new fad. But again, that's just my opinion. I'm no expert in this, but it's really cool. Anyways, I recommend the book, but it's really cool how that goes. But we'll get back on course. So I'm excited to talk about this topic, and it's about essentially athletes under eating, not eating enough calories, whether it's quality calories, whatever it is. What are some things that you've seen when it comes to that? Is that a common trend, athletes under eat? What do you see?
Yeah, I mean, depending on what sport you look at, you're looking at 15 to 50% of athletes under fueling. Straight up.
Wait, say it again?
Depending on what sport we're looking at, 15 to 50% of athletes under fueling. And that's, day to day, within day, stuff like that. We can kind of talk about those nuances and get into it. I think it's a big deal. But it's funny. I think you talk about eating enough.
Okay.
Right? And I think these phrases get thrown around a lot these days. And honestly, you hear athletes talk this way, but you also hear nutrition professionals talk this way, right? And they say, you got to eat enough to perform at 100% or whatever, right? We got to eat enough so that, fatigue thresholds don't come down. You don't want to eat too much of this or that. And it's like, what do these things mean?
Right.
Eat enough, eat too much. That's so vague, right? Okay. And so, a lot of what I feel like I do, if I was going to, distill my practice down into one concept. Okay. Right, which is probably unfair. But, a lot of what we do is create awareness. Okay. Right? Create greater awareness and kind of start to understand, what do my energy needs look like today? Right? What is under fueling? What am I currently doing right now? What am I doing in the morning? What am I doing before training? What am I doing after training? And how does that compare to my needs? And where's the discrepancies? And then, what can I do to kind of fill those gaps and to start to fuel correctly and to really start to picture your needs? Because at the end of the day, it's if you can't articulate your nutrition needs today as an athlete, if you just can't clearly articulate them in some way, shape, or form, how do you expect to meet them?
I like that.
Why would we expect to fuel?
Yeah, I mean, it makes complete sense. I think what's interesting about that is the awareness aspect. You talk about being able to make them aware of what they're doing. And I think that's how you can change a habit, make a new routine, build something that's going to actually, edify you or build you up over time. I think that's really cool. And that's what I've really, again, guys, what I really appreciate about Scott and also Susan, what they're doing is they're trying to help educate and make people, build some self-efficacy. And I think that's what's really cool because, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, people come in here and they'll be like, I want to lose weight. I'm like, that's cool. That's really cool. I think I did the math. This was old numbers, but I got it also from RTS. If you sleep, 8 hours a day, I forgot what it was, and they train with us, say they just train with us once a week, or 3 times a week, 1 hour per time they come in, it's like 0.3%, right? And the stuff they're doing outside of the gym is going to have a way bigger impact on them reaching their goals,
Yeah, and I mean, there's been a lot of studies done in kind of more general population if you're talking about weight loss, but there's been a lot of studies done in general pop and some reviews and meta-analyses and things like that. And yeah, we do see that training plus nutrition is going to be about 3 to 4 times kind of more impactful on weight loss outcomes than kind of training alone.
Right, for sure.
Right? You just have to have both those pieces of the puzzle. And it's, with our athletes, I mean, we're going through a lot of winter training. I mean, COVID right now, right? A lot of athletes are trying to train on their own. And I mean, for some guys, it's actually pretty beneficial. For some ladies, it's pretty beneficial because they feel like they get a longer off season. They get to kind of fill some of those holes in their games, in their approaches that they otherwise wouldn't, which is kind of cool. But I mean, we're going through a lot of winter hypertrophy phases with a lot of our athletes, right? Just trying to put on muscle and put on strength. And what we see is those athletes who are kind of utilizing nutrition resources versus those athletes are not. Over 16, 20 weeks, I mean, we're getting around 9 to 10 pounds of lean mass gain in younger athletes, right? 8, 9, 10 pound kind of average gains in lean mass versus 3 to 4 pounds in those athletes who are not kind of utilizing the nutrition side of things, right? Who are not fueling their body, fueling enough.
Which is funny to me. And what is enough? I like how you said it was vague, right? Okay, so here's another question adding on to that. So kids training regularly, so forth. Have you seen it to where, say, kids are training and their nutrition is, I don't want to say trash, but it's not locked in, right? And they're losing weight. Yeah. I mean, and uncontrolled weight loss, especially at kind of more elite levels, is probably the number one predictor of injury. I love it.
And so, that's a problem, right? And I think, weight monitoring is a tool, and we can kind of talk more about that, whether it's now or later or whatever. But, I mean, that is a tool because at the end of the day, the scale, day to day, there's fluctuations that aren't necessarily body mass related, muscle mass, fat mass, stuff like that. But those trends over time, right? That is indicative of energy balance, of calories in, calories out. And I think, when we start talking about energy balance, I think, some people think it's overly simplistic, and that's where people run into challenges with energy balance doesn't make sense because you have to consider. Is
that a calories in, calories out? Is that what you're saying? Okay, okay,
totally. And I just think that equation is more complex than most people understand.
No doubt.
And calories in affects calories out. Calories out affects calories in. Right. And so there's a lot of complexities and nuances, but if we're talking kind of about foundational stuff, I mean, if we're not hitting those targets, it doesn't matter. And for athletes too, it's like, if we're trying to, if we're talking about putting on muscle mass, right? I mean, if you are not in an energy surplus, right? Not taking in enough calories to fuel training, fuel basic activities of daily living, fuel kind of general survival, right? Breathing, waste elimination, stuff like that, which gets high as an athlete. For sure. It's higher for student athletes because you layer in needs for growth and development too. Right. Any athlete, really under 18, but potentially you have to consider 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. I mean, those needs are so stinking high, and it's not like we have massive levels potentially of fat mass. Right. In most athletes. And so, if we're trying to put on muscle mass and we're not kind of fueling our bodies sufficiently, why are we gonna say, hey, I'm going to downregulate needs for living and upregulate needs for putting on muscle mass and go ahead and put on muscle? It's not going to happen.
Right. I feel you on that. I think what's kind of interesting too is you said the fueling essentially makes a big difference, and so you can do all those types of things you said, and how weight loss can be a major indicator. And I've seen the research on that also, talking about how you're more prone to injury.
Yeah.
Sorry. No. I was going to say, from that being said, why do you think injury can go up if the weight loss goes down?
Yeah. I mean, all sorts of risk factors. And I think, you know, even very specific mechanisms are still kind of being elucidated in research and stuff like that every day. You know, we can start out with kind of basic stuff. I mean, you know, at the end of the day, as soon as you're in a caloric deficit, right, muscle protein synthesis is going to drop 17 to 40%. Okay?
Hey, let's say that again. 17 to 40% drop in protein synthesis. I'm sorry, I just had to say it. Anyways, keep going. Yeah.
It's big time, though. I mean, you're working your tail off. Right, you got athletes in here putting out 100%. Like, why would you settle for 90% of the gains? Right. You're just not going to. And so, I mean, you do see the down regulations of protein synthesis. That, you know, that's going to influence how much muscle mass you can put on, how much muscle mass you can maintain, right? How well you can recover from training, stuff like that.
Right.
I mean, that's a big deal. We got, especially when you start, you know, having large gaps in energy, kind of energy balance, right? Big mismatches.
Like meals or?
Yeah, big mismatches between intake versus expenditure.
Got you.
Okay? So that could be day to day, just missing needs throughout the day, training really hard, not eating enough, or rest day, not eating enough. A lot of athletes struggle with that.
Okay.
We can talk about that. But, you know, I think when we have those big mismatches, right, we're not putting enough energy into our body. Energy availability kind of drops. And energy availability is a little bit of a scientific term. Kind of relates to energy intake versus your energy expenditure, your output, and your lean mass. But especially when we see really strong drops in energy availability, I mean, that's where potentially over time, okay, we start seeing suppression of hormones that are crucial to a lot of these recovery processes.
I'm gonna pause you right there. Yeah, just hold that thought. Yeah, you heard what he just said. Hormones. Right? Everybody just looks at essentially the external, okay? The external, I'm losing weight, I'm looking at the scale, this type of stuff. But there's really complex things going on. I mean, he's using some great terms, right? You guys Google them, right? Maybe not, you know, but I mean, I don't know, find a medical journal, whatever. But talking about those things, there's stuff going on inside of us internally that we tend to, like you said, it's like, well, there's a lot you got to dive into with that. It's more complex, and I keep saying that, which I think is really cool because the human body is complex. But the things that are going on internally are what you're seeing externally. So, anyways, keep going with that hormone thing. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, and so it's really multidimensional, right? We talk about impacts on muscle protein synthesis, and you know, some of that's hormonally driven. There's potentially other mechanisms at play, but you know, there's aberrations in these hormones that help us, right, with recovery, that help initiate recovery, things like that. There's drops in the immune system, and you know, our immune system and how we manage inflammation is crucial to that recovery process. And that's, you know, a lot of, I think, you know, athletes and non-athletes and people like that get tripped up. Like, oh, inflammation bad, right? At the end of the day, we do see that, hey, if we squash inflammation after training, like we slam your body with high doses of anti-inflammatories, right? Even like high dose vitamin A, C, E, stuff like that, right? I mean, we can reduce gains from training by 30, 40, 50% over programs, right? So we need some of that
for recovery to help reach those gains.
Definitely. So I mean, there's complex processes at play where we're kind of influencing recovery and things like that. I mean, you can even look at, hey, if we're, you know, low energy intake and now effectively our muscle glycogen stores, our stores of carbohydrate, right, that we're using when especially we're doing kind of high intensity training, right? Or, you know, even moderate intensity training for most athletes is still, you know, dipping into muscle glycogen stores. I mean, as those carbohydrate stores drop, all of a sudden our muscles may not be as elastic, right? They may not be able to return to form as well, right? We stretch them, right? And maybe they don't resist that stretching enough.
Right.
Then what happens?
Not good things.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
That's pretty cool, man. I think that's interesting, and nutrition to me is fascinating. I think it has healing properties, all that kind of stuff. But I love what Scott said, essentially about putting anti-inflammatories, how it can reduce your gains. So essentially, what you're saying is you have to have some level of soreness, or it's okay to have some level of soreness. Let the body heal through that and go from there, so you can continue to adapt to that stress, which I think is really cool. I mean, we talk about inflammation is a bad thing, and now, intense levels of inflammation is not good. We're not saying that get inflamed and then recover, but that does happen. But if you're at high levels, it's going to make a massive difference on disease and all this kind of stuff too, and whether you can recover, whether you're sleeping well, and so forth. But I think it's really cool what he said, is that we've got to let this process happen to heal and kind of go from there. But that's super cool, man.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely nuances, right? And there's stuff at play, and that's, I think, a lot of what we're trying to do is just get guys thinking about these things a little bit more complexly, right? Because the nutrition industry, training industry, it's so into give me that one word, one phrase answer. What's the quick answer, right?
Yeah.
And there's no quick solutions to performing at 100%, to standing out at, you know, whatever level of competition and kind of getting that spot at the next level.
Yeah.
There's no shortcuts.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think, you know, you can't look at that kind of stuff. And, you know, getting back to energy availability, right? As soon as we start trying to take these shortcuts, we focus on supplements or nutrient timing or something like that, which can have strong impacts on performance. But I mean, from a priority standpoint, if you're not putting enough energy in your body, like that's number one.
Right.
That's the biggest.
That's cool.
That's the biggest kind of priority, number one priority. Then we can look at, you know, macronutrient breakdown, micronutrients quality, timing, stuff like that. You know, and we do a lot of those things at the same time. But you have to
have enough
fueling. Yeah, you have to be fueling properly, right? We got to have enough energy coming into the system. You know, but you know, when there's not, that's where we start to see, hey, low energy availability. All of a sudden, injury risk, right? Risk of upper respiratory tract infections, right? I mean, those things are going up like fourfold.
Yeah.
Right. I'm not selling any special. Hey, you don't need a vaccine. I'm not saying anything. I'm not selling anything like that. But I mean, it's a big deal, and I mean, you look at training availability, right? In elite athletes, training availability is effectively responsible for 80+% of successful seasons. Yeah. Right? Like just showing up here, being 100%, being ready to go, not missing training, not having to downregulate because you're not feeling good. Right? And that's 80+% of it right there. And so if we're increasing injury risk, if we're increasing risk of colds and flus, stuff like that by underfueling,
why are you doing it then?
You know, you're missing out.
Yeah, that's wild, dude. That's wild, which is super cool. I mean, I think what's interesting too is you talked about the muscle stretching and so forth and not restoring based on underfueling. What's really interesting to me is the so like obviously we want to put size on the athletes that come in and so forth, but I have some other clients that are adults or even kids that say they had a big growth spurt and they're like that whole like, oh, they'll grow into their body thing. The efficiency of movement. And if you don't have availability of energy use, correct me if I'm wrong on this, if you don't have a good level of energy availability, you can't really train effectively to make sure that, you know, there's that actual skill acquisition happening. You know, like what do you think? Like
100%. I mean, the fact is, if you're not putting in enough energy in the system, concentration drops. Right, your ability to focus on these things to activate muscles, and muscle activation, thinking about what you're doing is hugely important. Right, we're starting to see that, and I think motivation to train is a big one. Yeah, that comes down, right? I mean, we get athletes. It's funny. I had this one guy play football in like maybe a year or so ago, and coaches were giving him such a hard time. Like, you know, he's just not focused. He's not paying attention. He's always like lying down when we're talking and stuff like that. And I bring him. He's like 6 feet and like, I don't know, 170 pounds, 175 pounds. He's probably more. He's probably like 6'2". But you know. He's skinny for a wideout. He's still small, right? I mean, you're not disrupting. You're not going up and boxing people out for balls and stuff like that. This kid's not eating enough. He's like 4% body fat. Doesn't have enough muscle mass on his body anyway. Like, he can't focus. He can't concentrate because he's not eating enough. Put some more food in him. All of a sudden, oh, look at that. You know, he can focus in training. He's on top of it.
Yeah. That's interesting. I don't want to go down the medication or ADHD route, so I'll pause myself there. But to me, sorry, my mind's going. It's fascinating, right? Like, I know that when I'm on my feet all day, like how I'm thinking constantly nonstop, if I'm not fueling myself, I can't perform my job very well. And I know that with myself, and it's been a trick to be strategic with changing our plans of eating and how we're doing those things. But it's like, why isn't that communicated enough? Like, you know, you know what I'm saying? Like, I know that, like, this is your field, you're professional. Why are we not communicating this enough? I feel like people are, like, restricting calories. Like, during the first initial COVID lockdown, like, mental health was at an all-time impact, and it still is, right? With what's going on. But there was, like, trends. I had to research this because I feel like I had conversations with athletes. There was, like, trends of, like, what I eat in a day. Right, like on TikTok and whatnot. I don't have TikTok, but you're seeing this, and then people are writing articles about how that is that's unhealthy. Why do people pay more attention to the things that are quote unquote trendy versus like, you're underfueling, just eat? Like, what do you think the disconnect is there?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, probably don't get your training and nutrition advice and programs from social media.
Yeah, I agree.
it's not the most individualized, controlled environment for quality advice and for advice that applies directly to you.
What do you mean? I can't get a consult on Instagram for surgery on my knee?
I don't know, man. Yeah, you get what you pay for, right?
I'm right there with you.
Free programs, free results. It's, and I think I trash on social media. I think social media, when we start thinking about like stages of change and stuff like that. I mean, I personally have trouble like staying consistent with like posting on social media because I feel like you're just like throwing information out to the abyss and like providing helpful information to people who potentially don't really value it. You're just like throwing it out there. It's really like, it can be a marketing tool, right? Mm-hmm. And for me, I'm like, just with all these, everybody who's like, paying me and coming in, I'm like, I want to, give you my time. Correct. So it's hard. So I have a hard time staying on top of social media for kind of those reasons. But, you look at stages of change, moving people from pre-contemplation to contemplation, not knowing that there's a problem to like, hey, maybe I should be thinking about this. Maybe I should be fueling here, training in this way, or I'm not thinking about, controlling my volume, managing my volume, or tapering or something, whatever, right?
Yeah.
So like, I think there's space for social media to really get people to think.
For sure.
Right?
I like it.
But then moving from like contemplation into preparation and action, that's where we see like really big breakdowns, right? Because, we need highly individualized approaches to understand like what are those priorities that are going to make you better, right? Like what's not important, what is important, what's going to make you better the fastest, what's that low-hanging fruit? And that's where like social media, I mean, pop on there, you get 100 great little nuggets about training or nutrition, depending on who the person is, right? You might get a lot of bad information too. Right. But there might be 100 pieces of information that could potentially be helpful, but like, where should you start? What's important? What's actually going to make a difference?
I feel you.
And that's definitely a challenge. But that's now we're down the rabbit hole.
Right, I feel you.
Kind of getting back into it. But I keep coming back to we're talking about energy availability and starting to think about these implications, right? And I do think that some of the disconnect that you were talking about earlier, sometimes it's how we've grown to kind of like accept the nutrition industry. Okay. Right? Like, I mean, if we think about kind of the public nutrition industry, weight loss industry, I mean, that gets applied to like everybody. Correct. Right? And like athletes, you can't take recommendations for a, 55-year-old with a job who's trying to lose weight and apply that to someone who, is highly active, training with very specific goals, trying to get faster, stronger, more powerful, whatever. There's a disconnect there. Definitely. And I think even people in our field, there's a huge spectrum of competency in the nutrition field, and probably in any professional field. Yeah. And so I think a lot of times, when practitioners don't do a really good job connecting, kind of, hey, what you're doing and what you could be doing to optimize performance, and what those like value-based outcomes are for you, very clearly. Like, hey, if we do this, this will happen. Here's what we're looking for. That's where we start to not really understand kind of nutrition or training, not be motivated, and all of a sudden it's like, I don't know who to follow, what makes sense, that kind of thing. It's so vague versus like, if we understand, if we're talking about energy availability, right? And we're looking at, okay, hey, let's look at like within day, right? Not even just day to day, just eating enough, but like within day. I mean, there have been some really cool studies coming out over the last couple of years, looking at within day energy intake, energy expenditure, stuff like that. I mean, impacts on training 2 hours later of eating breakfast or not eating breakfast. Okay. Right? Meal skipping is a huge problem with athletes. For sure. Right?
I think schools make a
meal skipping, too. Not eating enough. Yeah, I mean, some guys it's like wake up, flip open Zoom, make sure that camera's off, and like, you're in school in bed. Yeah. And that's a problem, right? We definitely lose a lot of structure, but I mean, there's a study done a year ago, breakfast versus no breakfast, right? We start looking at these things. Training 2 hours later, so AM training, right? Athletes who ate breakfast versus didn't, right? We had 6% more bench reps completed, 15% more squat reps completed throughout the kind of training test session. I mean, look at what that's going to do. I mean, if you have an athlete come in here who over a training session at the same RPE, same perceived exertion, can put out 15% more reps, how much stronger, how much better are they going to get, how much faster?
For sure. You have to taper back at all, you know?
Yeah.
Hold on. Yeah, man, I think that's super cool. Like, if you think about those things, like if you get those if you get more reps in over time, one, that's more demand on tissue. And I guess you could say like, you know, oh, it's more, you know, time under tension. But over time, you have more quality reps. That's going to make a big difference. And I'm a big believer in, like, I'll be honest, man. I have kids that are like, oh, I lift. I've done lifting for, you know, 3 years at the high school. I'm like, that's cool. I'm like, show me a bench press or show me a row. I'm like, that's not a rep.
Yeah.
So I'm like, you know, the form's bad, but if you have your body prepared and fueled and you're doing that with quality movements, then you're putting the fueling on top of that, 15% more. I mean, I don't know which kids wouldn't want 15% more or grade points if they've got an F or say they have a D and they're like, I need C, or, you know, to joke, you know, C's get degrees, which I'm not a believer in that guy, you know, but it works, you know.
He said it here first.
Right? But if you go from having, you know, a C and you add 15 points to that, I mean, you're like, now you're in the B area. It's like, whoa, I'm cool with that. And you can apply that simple context to lifting. If you have that extra 15%, it will over time make a massive difference and put you ahead of athletes you're trying to perform better than, athletes that, you know, you want to essentially get a scholarship over or even get a shot to a preferred walk-on spot. I think it's interesting because it's so hard, I feel like, with nutrition, not for me personally, because I see the benefit, but to communicate to people, even with training sometimes, you got to be involved in the process. It does take time. And I think that we've been ingrained, whether it's psychological stuff, whatever it is, like, I'm done with this TV show, turn it off. But before, you had to get up. I remember my grandparents' house, they had to click the TV, you know, like, just the effort level of making a decision to have a certain outcomes going down. So why would we not expect people to be like, well, I just want to take a pill, or I want to do this, and then I'm fine. You know, I think that's what's partially the hard thing, right? Is a psychological aspect, but
and I mean, athletes don't always feel those changes, right? You don't always, you know, a lot of times you do. I mean, I think, you know, on the nutrition side of things, you know, when we look at kind of implementing a lot of resources and tools and stuff like that, you know, we've seen athletes typically, like 70% of athletes tend to feel impacts of nutrition within a week or two, right? Just in terms of those impacts on how I feel during training, how I feel after training, things like that. Some don't. And I mean, at the end of the day, as athletes, you know, we don't always expect you to, because we're working at, according to RPE a lot of times, right? And so it's like, hey, if I'm working at RPE 9, right? And, you know, I feel like this, and you know, and then we extend our fatigue threshold up, you know, 10 points, whatever. But I'm still working at RPE 9. Now I'm just putting out more. I'm getting better. I'm getting more gains out of it, right? But I don't necessarily feel a lot different. It's RPE 9, RPE 9, RPE 9, right? And that's, you know, especially with athletes under fueling, there's a lot of recommendations out there in our field. It's like, oh, you know, if you don't feel good during training, if you feel like you're recovering slowly, I think those biofeedback measures are important, right? But, you know, they also have limits, because we don't always feel those things. And why would we want to wait till we feel those things too? Like, you don't want to wait 3, 6, 9 months down the road until we kind of feel like garbage or finally notice it. And a lot of times we don't. To start to, you know, make some changes or understand what the heck we need to be eating.
Right, man. I think that's interesting because, I mean, the hard part is like, with training, if I relate that to some aspect, when I have somebody do an exercise, like, they'll do an exercise and say, for example, based off physics, based off the line of force, I'm like, they should feel this in their rear delt. Let's just say rear delt, whatever it is. And they're like, I feel it like in the front of my shoulder. And you're like, what's going on? Like, that makes no sense to me at all. You know, and it's like, the hard part is if I use RPE, sometimes we can, within ourselves, based off how we eat that day, how we sleep, that 9 could be technically, when I'm fueled, could be like a 6. You know, and so I feel like that's the hard part, you know, of like explaining those things. But I think RPE is a great avenue to use to check in with yourself, to really just check in. You know, I don't think people check in enough, right? That's what I think is great about, you know, your guys' posts that you do with lifting, and you're like, you see the intensity, you see you're going at it. You know, you guys will crack jokes like, I shouldn't do that bar or whatever it is, or, you know, and it's just really cool to see, because you guys have been consistent over time with effort, with consistency, and you tie that on with nutrition, it makes a massive difference, you know?
No, definitely. And I just try to, you know, if I'm lifting, I just try to not look bad compared to Sue, you know? I can't be, I mean, she's sitting there at like nationals, like squatting like 365 with like hip impingement, like to death, and I'm like,
I don't know how you do that.
I don't know. Right. But yeah, it's, you know, we need those biofeedback measures, and those are important, but we also have to start to kind of refine these concepts of like what is enough, you know, what is too much. And, you know, I think, you know, if we look at, you know, a couple athletes even that I've had come in over the last couple of years as kind of really interesting examples, right? One was a distance runner, okay? And she came in, she was kind of uncontrollably losing weight one season in college. Okay. And she was like right on that borderline of not being able to compete.
I got you.
Okay. And, you know, she had seen other practitioners, and she's like, well, you know, I've been cleared, you know, from having an eating disorder. Like, I really want to, like, you know, fuel my body efficiently. Yeah. I just don't necessarily understand how, right? And but like people keep telling me like, well, I just have an eating disorder or whatever, but then they cleared me. And the funny thing is, you start to talk to her, and it's very clear that no one's really sat down and showed her like, what do your energy goals look like? Like, what does a day of fueling properly look like? And what are you currently doing? And then how do we fill those gaps? Like, how do I give you those targets, right?
Love it, yeah.
And there are challenges with larger organizations and how you kind of convey that, right? Because it's challenging to, you know, determine energy needs and macronutrient needs and stuff like that as, you know, think about, I mean, athletes have a huge variety of goals and they're going through injury, no injury, or, you know, training volumes going up and down and changing. And, you know, with COVID, right? Like sessions get canceled, sessions get added. So it's hard. There are avenues, you know, to do that. That's something, you know, we've been working on with Fuelogics, and that's, you know, probably a separate, but, when you can create some clarity for these athletes, right? And that's an easy check. Like, do you have clarity in your life? Why hold yourself to a standard that you don't, you know, that's completely vague? Like, oh, I'm not eating enough. Like, what is enough? How do you know?
Right. There's no marker. There's no target or understanding. I like that you said the clarity, and I think that's why people get confused when they come in and train here, right? Because we do like to some aspect, like, you know, we do the consultation to see if we're a good fit for what they're looking for, and then we'll do, you know, part one of the assessment, and they expect, like, let's get going. And I'm like, well, I need to see if you're even healthy enough to exercise.
Yeah.
And then from there, they come back in for part two. I walk them through on the thing drawn out. This is what I found. This is where we need to go. And like, they might come with pain, and it's like, you're not controlling your right hip hike. I don't know, something simple, like you can't hike your hip very well, and that's throwing off why your back hurts, right? Or like, oh my gosh, and like, it's gone, or my knee pain. I had a kid come this week. This kid, props to him, dude. He ate enough. He did over COVID, man. And so he had some stuff at home weights. I was like, listen, dude, do what you need to do. Stay consistent with lifting, but you got to eat. Take advantage of this. You're home. You can control the food intake and so forth. So when he started doing that, dude, he came in, dude. He put on like 40 pounds, dude, in 3 months. I mean, it wasn't bad. I was like, wow. Like, now, was it all straight muscle? No, I don't know about that, but he looked good, right? Got preferred walk-on spot to Wazoo. Got offered at UW too, and it's just pretty cool. But he came in for a table session. Sorry, I was kind of giving background on him. He's like, my knees hurt when I squat, right? I'm like, okay. And I hadn't seen him for a while. He's like, I'm feeling good. I'm gonna lift at home. So I was like doing this, checked him out. I'm like, oh my gosh, dude, you're not flexing your right glute. So he's shifting all his weight to the left, and he had knee pain left, and so pelvis position. So we just did isometric on his right glute. He was like squatting. He's like, it's gone. I'm like, okay, well now let's start to look at like, what's the bigger picture? Okay, this isn't stabilized, which is stabilizing your pelvis. Now let's work on that tibia moving and controlling your heel. And he's like, oh yeah, remember I broke both my feet when I was like 5? I'm like, yeah, dude. I keep saying this. So I think what's cool about that is, how important do you think it's like, okay, big picture, and then from there, for athletes, or really general population, but obviously we're talking about athletes, big picture, what you've got to work on, and then from there, what are the things that you can individualize, right, and kind of break that down?
Yeah, and I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, would you get that athlete in here, and would you ever tell them, well, you know, like, squat enough, just activate your right glute enough, you know, but not too much, but like enough, right? Like that's how we take nutrition. That's how we accept it.
I think that's kind of, you know,
squat enough.
You know, I hate it when they're like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like, no, you didn't say anything. You know?
Yeah. You talked for 10 minutes, but you didn't say anything.
What'd you say? No, that's what I'm asking you. No, you know what I'm saying, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, big picture wise and like specific wise, what are...
Well, and I mean, even getting back to, I mean, it has relevance to social media, right? It has relevance to what we're talking about here. It has relevance to, you know, this athlete that I introduced, right? Where, you know, your energy needs are completely different than somebody else's energy needs, right? You know, at the end of the day, I mean, as an athlete, they may fluctuate. You know, we've got Small power lifters, right, on an off day who maybe don't need, much more than 1,900 calories. Right. And then we've got, athletes who are, we got football guys who are 235 trying to put on weight, doing 2 days, where needs are 4,500, 5,000, 5,500 calories. So kind of understanding what that looks like and what that looks like training versus rest, things like that. I mean, it's that individualized nature. I mean, I think a lot of the way we approach nutrition, or the way people have been trained to approach nutrition, is kind of scaling down public health measures. Okay. Right, like we have like
that's a good. I'm sorry, that's a really good point. Yeah, sorry, keep going. Yeah, that kind of.
Yeah, so like we have maybe a group in front of us, a team in front of us, or a couple teams in front of us.
Yeah.
Right, and we say like a lot of people take like these tools that we would use in public health context, like plate models.
Okay.
And say like, well, here you guys go. Right, and so we scale down public health measures, and I'm much more a fan of scaling up individualized nutrition.
Okay.
Figuring out how can we help each and every one of these athletes within this team, right?
Yeah.
Because a team or a group is made up of a bunch of individuals.
Love it.
Right? It's not an average, it's not the lowest common denominator, right? We can't treat according to that. So how do we kind of scale up those individualized approaches? And I think that's a lot of what we do.
I think this was cool, man. I think that's interesting because, like, I mean, that's the same thing we do here with training. I mean, yeah, some of the lifts, like, oh, it's a lunge, a lunge, a lunge. It's not. Like a diet is not a diet. It's not a diet. Depending on the athlete, what they do, how they use their body, the energy needs, the demand on tissue, all that type of stuff. And I think this was interesting is that we try to simplify things. Now, don't get me wrong, like, I think trying to make things simple is a good thing.
Yeah, 100%.
But eventually, like, I mean, there's no way I'm going to feed my son. Like, I mean, he's a little bit over 1 now. Like, he doesn't just have milk. He can't have milk the rest of his life. At some point, like you said, there's an entry-level position where to get in that journey. Like, yeah, he's gonna have milk, and then all of a sudden, what? He's not gonna get everything from that milk, right? And now I'm not getting into breast milk and how interesting it is and how it changes and so forth. But he's gonna need food, and that's gonna progress over time. But I think what happens is I've seen with nutrition, people think like, oh, this diet worked for me back in the 90s, and I'm gonna go back to that, and they're like, it's not working.
Yeah, I mean, Gen Pop, we get a lot of yo-yo people, right?
Yeah.
Who spend. I feel bad, right? Because like they come in, I'm happy they finally get the help they need.
Yeah.
But like a lot of these fads, people selling them supplements, stuff like that,
Yeah.
right? I mean, we go up and down and spend thousands of dollars, right? And it's like, come in, a couple $100, make this happen.
Right.
It's straightforward when you have that kind of care. Athlete wise, I think if you start at even at the high school level,
Okay.
right? You have the potential to effectively make $200,000 over 4 years.
Okay.
Right? If you're paying attention to train nutrition, getting strong, getting more powerful, getting faster, standing out, then you have the ability to literally work yourself into a scholarship, into free education, free 4 more years of education, right? What's the value of that?
Right.
$20,000, $50,000 a year by putting in the effort, right? Mm-hmm. Extend your playing career. You have that potential there. And so I think, it's a lot of what we talk, especially with kind of our coaches, where we're trying to help them understand like, hey, how do you guys encourage people to pay more attention to their nutrition or their training or whatever aspect of their game? It's like, get them thinking about the big picture a little bit.
I like that.
Right? Like if I'm an athlete trying to earn, from high school to college, earn that scholarship, earn that opportunity to extend my career, make another couple $100,000. Like, why would I try to piecemeal a plan together, a nutrition or a training plan together from social media when I could invest like a couple $100 or a few $100 in training and nutrition and know exactly what I need to do and get those results, right? I mean, the path is there.
I agree, and I think that I think the hard part is that's why when you start posting more on social media, I was trying to encourage you because I think people don't know what they don't know until they don't know. Right?
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, I didn't even know this was an option. Right? People come in for training, like, I didn't even know this was an option. Right? So, I'm going to encourage you, keep doing it. I know it's frustrating.
We'll see.
It's tough, man. It's tough.
Yeah.
You're like, and then it's hard because it's like, you see this stuff that's posted, and it's like people's value is in likes versus actual quality content, right? And so, which is interesting.
Well, you're just fighting the masses, right? You're putting out good content, other people are not, right? And you're kind of fighting, right? Who has the louder voice, right? There's definitely some challenges.
I mean, the squeaky wheel gets the right?
Yeah.
And that's one thing I think that I personally had to get over is like, there's a lot of bad stuff out there, but I can't choose people's choices for them, you know. But there's something cool that people can choose, which is to not underfuel, especially athletes. You know, don't underfuel. So I guess what are the biggest takeaways you'd recommend to athletes if they're under eating, or obviously I'd recommend them come see you.
Start to add clarity to your understanding of this, right? Like, what does under eating mean, right? What do your needs look like? Yeah. Because you know, at the end of the day, we can potentially have this huge impact on performance, right? On injury risk, on our ability to, you know, play at the next level, right? We talked about, you know, kind of nutrient timing stuff and energy availability and like micro periods throughout the day, right? But we know, I mean, at the end of the day, under fueling breakfast, right? We know there's been some really cool studies come out over the last couple of years, kind of building on previous knowledge, and we see that insufficient breakfast can impact training 9 hours later. Right. It can reduce work output 3 to 5%, regardless of how we eat. Even if we make up those calories at lunch. Right. It can reduce work output 3 to 5% at training, you know, 9 hours later. Right. And that's you know, getting back to how much stimulus are we providing to our body. But I think, you know, that awareness piece is huge. You know, we see a lot of struggles with you know, performance and physique, right? And athletes getting kind of worrying about, oh, you know, I don't want to eat too much because, you know, I don't want to put on too much fat mass.
Yeah, right. Because I mean, you got to take that picture for Instagram, right?
Yeah, for sure, man.
I'm just kidding. But yeah, no, I feel you.
100%. And so, you know, I think there's definitely struggles there, and I think a lot of it is just understanding how do we put on strength without putting on fat mass. And at the end of the day, I mean, with athletes who are, you know, training, who are active, who have kind of a consistent program, even if you put on weight a little bit uncontrollably, right? You put on a pound a week for like 12 weeks or something like that. At least half of that's going to be lean mass. Right. Even if we don't have the best training program, even if we don't have the best nutrition. But at least half of that's going to be lean mass. Right. And you're so active anyway. I'm like, you know, we want to err on the side of not eating enough or eating a little too much. I mean, it's easy to scale back. It's easy to pull off that fat mass and understand what we need. But you know, I think, you know, moving away from operating out of fear and moving into operating kind of out of, you know, from a place of knowledge and a place of confidence. And it fortifies you against bad information that you're going to get at kind of all levels as well.
For sure, man. I love that, man. Well, good, dude. I mean, I think we should do another one. I mean, we'll figure out another time, let people marinate on this. But for athletes, try not to undereat, right? Figure those things out. Ask yourself some questions. Be real with yourself. Am I eating enough? Right? And I know it's, like we said, it's a vague type of thing.
Do I know that I'm eating enough? Am I confident that I'm eating enough? Am I confident that I'm eating enough at these times?
Yeah. And then from there, if you need some help, go find a professional. If you're in the area near us, come contact Scott and them. Like, I'll have them talk about where to contact you. It'll be in the show notes. And you can reach out to me directly, too. If you want to just swing by the gym, you know, we've got their cards here. You can reach out to them. I mean, they're a great resource. So if people do want to get a hold of you, where can they find you?
Yeah, online. You can reach out online. People reach out over social media, right? Shoot us an email, give us a call. That's all. We can put that kind of information to.
Yeah, I'll put it in for sure.
It's super easy, right? We're all over the place. You know, Google me.
Yeah, you know.
I might not, maybe I'm not that popular. But no. You search VitL Nutrition, you search Scott Littlefield, you'll figure it out.
Yeah, dude, I love it, man. Well, dude, I really appreciate you coming on, and I think this would be very applicable for a lot of athletes, especially now and actually going forward, really. So don't underfuel because it will impact your performance. All right, guys. So this is Curtis and Scott. Thanks for coming. We're signing out, and we'll see you guys next time.